نحمده ونستعين ونستغفره ونؤمن به توكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. أما بعد فقد قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم خيركم خيركم لأهلكم وأنا خيركم لأهلي. When you think about the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the best of creation, the greatest human, the best role model, we notice that he achieved perfection in every aspect of life. He was our moral example, our spiritual example. He also was a leader in war, a leader in politics, a leader in forming and growing a new community and seeing it blossom. He also mastered the home environment, the best of husbands, the best of fathers, the best of stepfathers. And he achieved balance in all of these areas of life, that he was able to be the best at everything. So when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would lead an army, he would do it in the best way possible. When he was governing the nation, he would do it in the best way possible. And when he was at home with his wives and his children and his stepchildren, he would do it in the best way possible. And we know that in Islam, there is a very strong emphasis on family. Family is one of the most central tenets of our religion. That even from the goals of the Sharia is the preservation of family. And there are many verses of the Quran, many ahadith, all about family. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us, خَيْرُكُمْ خَيْرُكُمْ لِأَهْلِكُمْ. The best of you are those who treat their families well. And he said, وَأَنَا خَيْرُكُمْ لِأَهْلِي. I treat my family best from all of you. Meaning that our model in how to be a husband or a father should come from the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. An important note about these type of ahadith. There are many ahadith where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would say things like, I am the best of you with treatment of my family, or I will be the leader of humanity at the day of judgment. Understand, these ahadith are not boasting, as some people may assume. Rather, as the messenger of Allah, he had to convey the message. Right? And part of the message is this. So we have to say this from a place of humility and from a place of informing us of what Allah wants from us. Allah wants us to follow Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in how we treat our families. And so Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had to say this so that we would know to follow his example. Right? So don't misunderstand these ahadiths. They are coming from a place of telling the truth, of conveying the message as honestly as possible. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was indeed the best of models in how to run a family. And he achieved balance in what the role of a man in a family should be. Right? On one hand, he was loving, he was compassionate, he was kind, he had all of those qualities. On the other hand, he was a leader. He was firm about the boundaries of Islam. He taught his family the religion. He would not allow them to do anything haram. So he achieved this balance between being loving yet firm. I think this is something that we often lose track of when we think about a man's role in the family. Right? A man is meant to be a leader of the household. He's meant to be loving yet firm. He's meant to uphold the law of Allah and ensure that everyone living in his home is following the laws of Allah. But the way that he conveys this, the way that he interacts with those under his care, should primarily be a loving manner. And so we see Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he did both. Right? So for example, if you look at the way he was with his daughters, specifically Fatima radiallahu anha, the leader of the women of Jannah, we see him both teaching her Islam and being firm on certain issues, while being extremely loving as a father. So it is narrated that whenever Fatima radiallahu anha would visit her father, he would get up and he would go and he would kiss her forehead and he would offer her his seat. Right? It was a very loving treatment of his daughter. And this is something all men should model in how we treat our children, to make them feel loved, to make them feel welcome, to make them feel like they belong. And on the other hand, he taught her the best way to live her life. So when the housework was getting too much for her in her home, she went to her father, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and asked him for a slave to take care of the housework. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told her that it's not befitting the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to have slaves working in her household. And instead he taught her to make certain adhkar. The adhkar we all do today of 33 times Subhanallah, 33 times Alhamdulillah, 34 times Allahu Akbar. Allah will put barakah in her work and give her the energy to get housework done. Right? And she followed what her father taught her. So you notice he didn't play favorites here, right? Because at that time, the Muslims had just conquered some territories. They were definitely slaves that he would have given her, but he wanted to set an example. His family should be a model of how a Muslim home should be. And that means that his daughter should be a model of a woman who did the housework herself instead of, getting other people to do it. And so he was firm on this, and he taught her that this is what she should do, even though other options were available. So we see that he maintained this balance of educating the family and being loving. And not just with his own children, but with his stepchildren as well. And many a times, when we talk about the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we forget that he also raised other people's children. He had stepchildren. So the famous story of Salama, right? Salama radiallahu anha, when her husband passed away, and she wondered, she used to make this dua, oh Allah, replace what I have lost with something better than it. And she used to wonder to herself, who's better than Abu Salama, right? She really loved her husband. He was an amazing man. He was one of the early Sahaba. And she used to wonder, who's better than Abu Salama? And she used to make this dua. And eventually, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself proposed to her, right? And she had two conditions on marrying him, right? She said, number one, you have many wives and I'm a jealous woman, right? So some women have the jealous nature, they don't fit in easily with the polygamous lifestyle. So he made dua that Allah removes that jealousy from her heart. And, she ended up, marrying him and, being able to have a happy, loving marriage. But her other condition, the one I want to mention, is that she said, I have a lot of children. And meaning from a previous marriage. And he said, your children are my children. Your children are my children. And so he married her and he raised her children like his own. And in this we see that he treated her children very lovingly. There are many ahadiths of how he treated her daughters and sons like they are his own. And we also see he educated them. So the famous hadith, right? We all know the hadith, do not eat with your left hand because shaitan eats with his left hand, right? But do you know the full hadith? The full hadith was that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in the house of Salama with her and her children, and they were sitting together to eat. And one of her sons went to eat the food with his left hand. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam corrected him and told him, do not eat with your left hand because shaitan eats with the left hand. And so from that day onwards for the rest of his life, the stepson of Rasulullah, he would eat with his right hand, and he's the narrator of this hadith. In fact, the children of Salama, most of them became narrators of hadith because they spent so much time with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that they learned hadith directly from him. He treated them like his own children as he promised them. And he raised them like his own children. So he educated them and he corrected them. But he also showed them that love and affection. And again, nowadays, one of the challenges we see in our community is that a lot of men who have stepchildren, they don't show them that love, right? They only show their love to their biological children. But in the perfect example, the example of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we see him being very loving with the children of Salama from her previous marriage because they were his stepchildren. Right? Similarly with the children of Khadija. Right? How many of us even know that Khadija had children from a previous marriage? Right? The most famous hadith describing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the most detailed description we have of him in the books of ahadith, in the Shama'il of Imam at-Tirmidhi. Who is the narrator of that hadith? Hind ibn Abi Hala, the son of Khadija from her previous marriage, the stepson of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you want to know a detailed description of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in terms of how he looked, how he walked, how he talked, how he interacted with people, you read this narration, where the Prophet's own grandson, right, the Prophet's grandsons, Hassan and Hussein, they were very young when he passed away. So when they grew up, they asked Hind ibn Abi Hala to describe their grandfather to them. Because he knew them, he spent more time with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam than they did. Right? He was the stepson, they were the grandchildren. He was with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam from before the message. They, they were very young when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away. So they asked him for the description. And this conversation, it's a very long ahadith, it's a long conversation between Hassan and Hussein. And Hind ibn Abi Hala split over 3 narrations in the Shama'il, which gives us the most detailed description of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that we know of. But this description, the point that I want to make is that this description is coming from his stepson, which means he had a very close relationship with his wife's children from previous marriages, that they remembered him so fondly, and they spoke about him so fondly, and they used such beautiful words to describe him, that right till today, these are the words we use when we describe Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And likewise, we see the same in his treatment of his wives. That Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with his wives, he educated them. He ensured that they followed Islam. He was a leader in the household. There were times when he would get angry and then he would be strict when they would, push certain boundaries. But for the most part, he was very loving. He was very kind, he was very considerate. And this is the balance that men need to have. Right? Men need to develop leadership personalities. And we need to be able to be leaders in our homes and in our communities. And to lead this ummah in the right direction. But we need to balance that with mercy and with love and compassion. And so, for example, we see with Aisha radiallahu anha, there are hadiths where he's a bit more firm with her, and there are hadiths where he's very soft and loving with her. Where he would joke with her, he would play with her, he would call her by loving nicknames. Right? He would call her Aish, he would call her Humaira, the one with rosy cheeks. Right? He had a very loving relationship with her, to such an extent that one of the Sahaba asked him in public, who is the most beloved person to you? He said, Aisha. And when he said, no, I'm talking about men, he said, her father. He didn't even say Abu Bakr, he said her father, showing his love for his wife. So he was very loving with Aisha radiallahu anha, but at the same time, he was strict on certain issues. So when the Ummah started to get wealth, for example, when the Ummah began to get wealthy, the wives of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they wanted to live a high quality lifestyle. Right? They wanted more wealth, they lived a very simple life. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam lived a very simple life. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had a very heated argument with his wives about this lifestyle issue and money and what's suitable for the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He actually stayed away from all of his wives for 40 days. For 40 days he stayed away from them, to such an extent that there was a rumor that he had divorced them. And Umar went to see him and to confirm with him, are you still married to them, what's going on? And he explained, no, we're still married, but I needed to give them some space so they can think about it. Do they want me or do they want the dunya? Right? And so he went for Aisha and he gave her a choice. He said, listen, if you want to live a fancy lifestyle, you can't be married to me because I don't live a fancy lifestyle. As the Prophet, he had to set the model of being the most simple of people, right? We know the simplicity of Rasulullah is one of his greatest qualities that we praise right till today. And so any woman married to him also had to live a simple lifestyle. So he gave his wives a choice. He gave all of them this choice. You can divorce and live a fancy lifestyle and no one will hold it against you, or you can stay married to me and live a simple lifestyle and expect your reward in the afterlife. And Aisha radiallahu anha chose him. And all the other wives chose him. They all chose to live a simple lifestyle because of their love for Rasulullah, their love for the religion, and for their hopes in the afterlife. Right? And so in this we see that Rasulullah, even though he was the most loving of husbands, he was very strict about not letting the love of the dunya affect his family. Right? And him staying away from his wife for 40 days was a way of showing them that he's angry with them. And so his way of showing that he is angry with them for giving preference to this dunya over the reward of the afterlife. And it made them think, it made them realize they were wrong, and they came back. So we see this balance. And this is the balance of perfection of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The perfect husband, the perfect father is not someone who is overly strict to the level that he becomes tyrannical. Nor is he someone who is so loving that he can be taken as a fool and his family do whatever they want and he has no control in the household and he's just paying the bills and everyone does whatever they want. No. But the perfect father and husband has balance. He is strict about the boundaries of Allah. He has a leadership personality and presence, but but he is loving, he is compassionate, he is kind, and he is able to balance the two qualities. And this is who Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was, and this is how we should aspire to be in our homes. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Alhamdulillah wahda wassalatu wassalamu ala man la nabiyya ba'da, amma ba'd, fa inna asdaqal hadith kitabullah wa khairu hadi Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, wa sharrul umuri muhdathatuha, wa kullu muhdathatin bid'ah, wa kullu bid'atin dalalah, wa kullu dalalatin finnar. If you look at the testimony of the people around Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam about his character, his wife Aisha radiallahu anha said that he never hit a woman or a servant in his life. And if you look at the time that he lived in, that's really amazing. He lived in a time when it was normal. In a time when it was completely normal to discipline someone through a smack. Right? Let's face it, it was normal right up 50 years ago, maybe 40 years ago. Right? So 1,400, it was very normal, but he never did it. Because he was on a higher level of character. Right? And even more amazing is the way he was with children. Because Anas ibn Malik worked for him as a child. For 10 years, he worked for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like as an apprentice to him. And Anas ibn Malik said that in my 10 years working for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not once did he frown at me and say a bad word to me and ask me, why did you do this, why did you do that? Not once did he talk to me like this. And so we see that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he had a unique way of teaching people and educating people and disciplining people, right? That he wouldn't need to resort to violence. Instead, he would, just his words and his way of talking would be enough for a person to realize they are wrong. And this is a skill that everyone needs to learn. And many people these days think that the only way they can get someone else to listen to them, is through, getting physical. And while there may be a time and place for that in the world today, but in our homes, we need to learn to use our words. We need to learn how to get people to understand things from how we speak. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was gifted in the way he spoke. So he would, for example, one of the Sahaba who had messed up, who had done something really wrong, came to him, and he says, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam smiled at me. But in the narration he described it, he says, when he smiled at me, I could see in his smile that he was angry and disappointed in me. And this is a very high level of communication, right? Where even when you're smiling at someone, you're maintaining that adab, you're maintaining that akhlaq, but your body language is indicating to the person that I'm disappointed in you. How could you do that? Right? And this is something we need to learn. And this is a aspect of the sunnah that I feel is missing in our times, the ability to convey our message to others in how we speak, in our body language, in our facial expressions. This is a very beautiful part of the sunnah that we need to learn from. So Anas ibn Malik, he mentions in another narration that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam once sent him to do some work, right? And he saw some children playing. He started playing with the children. He forgot about the work, and he ended up losing the money as well. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he found out, he simply laughed and he went and did the work himself. But Anas ibn Malik learned from it. That only happened once in his whole life. What does it tell you? It tells you he learned his lesson. And you see, sometimes you don't have to lose your temper to teach somebody a lesson. Especially with children and teenagers, they're going to mess up. And let's be honest, every child or teenager messes up in some way or another. They don't have our experience, they don't have our skills. For example, if you are fixing something in your home, you have like 20 years of experience. Now if you give it to your teenager to do, it's their first time trying it, they're not going to do as good job as you, because they don't have that experience. So this is why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that none of you truly believe until they are respectful to their elders and compassionate to those younger than them. Why does he mention compassionate to those younger than them? Because people younger than you are going to irritate you. Because they make more mistakes than you. They don't have the life experience that you have. They don't have the wisdom that you have. So they're going to, get on your nerves. You need to be more compassionate to them. You need to be more merciful with them. You need to give them some space to make mistakes and learn from their mistakes. Not every mistake is the end of the world. And so it's very important that parents, we learn not to overreact when our children mess up. Sometimes you see parents that a child will do something that's not even a sin, it's a worldly mistake, right? And they will react in such a way as if the child has committed kufr. And they would, that overblown reaction would completely break their relationship with their child. And this is not wise, and this is not the sunnah, and this is not good for your relationship with your children. So let's go back to the way of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the way he was with the children of his community, that he was more compassionate and forgiving and merciful with young people than he was with the older people. Because the older people, they have wisdom, they have experience, they should know better. The young people, they're still learning, they're still growing, they're going to mess up. This is the sunnah. This is how he was with Anas ibn Malik. This is how he was with his cousins. So the famous narration that when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was on his way for Hajj and he had his cousin Fadl ibn Abbas with him, and a beautiful young lady came to ask the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam some questions, and he caught his cousin checking her out, as you would say, right? He gently advised his cousin to lower his gaze and reminded him of the reward of lowering the gaze. There wasn't this blown out of proportion anger. How can you do this? You are Hajj, you the Prophet. Well, young people are going to mess up when they come to lowering the gaze, right? Let's face it, that's human. So instead, you remind him gently that this is wrong. This is the sunnah. This is what is expected. This is the reward for doing the right thing. You do it in a way that you show that you understand that they are struggling with their nafs, but you show them a better way. You don't justify what they're doing, but you show them that you understand they're struggling with their nafs, and you show them a better way. One more example, right? There was a young man in the community of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam who wanted to commit zina. He literally came to the Prophet in the masjid and said, "Let me commit zina." Right? He literally asked him for permission to commit zina. Now, we know if someone had to do that in our community, we'd probably slap him, right? I mean, that's one of those cases where I wouldn't find it unjustified, right? It's a very human reaction. How can you ask that? But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, understanding the mindset of a youngster, he sat him down, he spoke to him, he helped him to understand the rationale and the logic behind why zina is haram. And then he made dua for him. Again, a very compassionate approach to dealing with the struggles of a young person. I understand what you're going through. I understand the desires you're dealing with. But this is why it's haram. This is why you should avoid it. And may Allah help you to avoid it. This is the approach of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in dealing with young people. So this is the sunnahs that we need to revive in our lives. How we talk to young people. How we advise them. How we correct them. How we deal with them when they mess up. Right? Along with that, to have this leadership personality in our homes, where we maintain the boundaries of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we lead our family in a direction that is pleasing to Allah, and at the same time to be loving, to be compassionate, to be kind. Finding that balance is not easy, but that balance is the sunnah. And it is the model of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when he said that he is the best of husbands and fathers, he really meant it. That he had achieved that balance. He was both strict when he needed to be and loving most of the time. He was someone who taught him right from wrong, and he was someone who was compassionate and taught him how to seek Allah's forgiveness. And so we need to revive these concepts in our lives and follow his sunnah and study these ahadith so we can be more like him. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.